Kuki village volunteers, a necessary defense for the Kuki people and their ancestral lands. The Kuki people, an indigenous ethnic group that has inhabited the lands of present-day India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh for centuries, have faced numerous challenges throughout their history. Among the most recent and pressing of these challenges is the ongoing violence and systemic attempts to displace the Kuki people from their ancestral lands, which have been their home for generations. As this existential threat escalates, Kuki village volunteers have emerged as a necessary response to safeguard the people, their culture, and their way of life. The ongoing conflict in the Indian state of Manipur, which erupted in May 2023, has exposed the inadequacies of the established authorities to provide protection for the Kuki people. In the absence of effective intervention by the state and central governments, Kuki volunteers have stepped up to protect their communities, their traditions, and their lands. Their actions are not an attempt to wage war against the Indian state, but rather a defense of their rights, their culture, and their very survival. So, we stop. Historical context of the Kuki people. To understand the current situation, it is important to look at the history of the Kuki people. The Kukis are not a monolithic group, but comprise over 50 distinct tribes spread across India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. Historically, the Kuki people were known for their warrior spirit, their fierce independence, and their deep connection to their land. One of the most significant episodes in Kuki history is the Anglo-Kuki War, fought between the Kuki tribes and the British colonial forces from 1917 to 1919. This war, often overlooked in mainstream Indian history, was a 3-year-long struggle during which the Kuki people fought valiantly against British imperialism. The war was a manifestation of the Kuki people's resistance to foreign occupation and their refusal to be subjugated by an external power. In the aftermath of their defeat, the British divided the Kuki territory, known as the Kuki Independence Hills, into 3 separate countries: India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. This division has contributed to the continued fragmentation and marginalization of the Kuki people. During the Indian freedom struggle, the Kuki people also played a significant role. Over 80 Kuki individuals joined the Indian National Army, INA, under the leadership of Subhas Chandra Bose, fighting alongside their fellow Indians against the British. However, this contribution is largely neglected in Indian history, particularly the history of Northeast India, which has often been sidelined in national narratives. Despite their historical contributions and sacrifices, the Kuki people have faced a persistent campaign to undermine their identity and their rights. Over time, various pejorative labels have been applied to the Kuki people, such as terrorists, poppy planters, illegal migrants, and refugees. These narratives have been used to justify the erosion of their lands and their rights. The real purpose of these labels is to delegitimize the Kuki people's claims to their ancestral lands and to facilitate the process of land grabbing. The present conflict, the erosion of Kuki identity and territory. The current conflict in Manipur is the latest chapter in the long history of struggle for the Kuki people. Since the violence erupted on May 3, 2023, the Kuki community has endured brutal attacks, resulting in the destruction of over 200 villages and a significant loss of life. The scale of the violence and the disproportionate targeting of Kuki villages and individuals has created a humanitarian crisis. The death toll of Kuki people continues to rise, with many fearing for their survival and future. The Meitei community, which constitutes the majority in the Imphal Valley, has been accused of committing acts of terror and violence against the Kuki people. These actions include the burning of Kuki villages, widespread killings, and the displacement of thousands of Kuki families. The Meitei community, which is predominantly used the pretext of the Kuki people's alleged ties to insurgent groups to justify these violent actions. In addition to the direct violence, there is an ongoing effort to forcefully seize Kuki lands under the guise of environmental and conservation efforts. The designation of large portions of Kuki land as reserve forests is one such tactic used to dispossess the Kuki people of their ancestral territories. These laws, which are enforced with strictness, are applied primarily to the Kuki people, but not to others who occupy the same regions. The Kuki people view these actions as part of a broader strategy to undermine their autonomy and existence. Their ancestral lands, which have been passed down through generations, are now under siege. In response, Kuki volunteers have formed groups to defend their villages and safeguard their way of life. The role of Kuki volunteers, a necessary defense. The formation of Kuki village volunteers and the Kuki army is a direct response to the escalating violence and the lack of protection from state authorities. Since the outbreak of violence in May 2023, these volunteers have become a crucial force in the defense of Kuki villages. They are not a militia bent on waging war against India, but are instead protecting their people from external threats, particularly from those who seek to annihilate their culture, history, and physical presence in the region. The volunteers, composed of individuals from various Kuki tribes, have come together in the spirit of self-preservation. These volunteers are not well-equipped like the formal military forces, but are instead relying on their knowledge of the terrain, their traditional combat skills, and their deep sense of community to defend their homes. They are not fighting for conquest or domination, but are simply standing up for the right to live in peace on their ancestral lands. The Constitution of India provides for the right to self-defense in the face of external aggression or threats. The Kuki volunteers see themselves as exercising this right in order to preserve their existence. They are not waging war against the Indian state, but are fighting to protect their people from genocidal violence and displacement. Their efforts are a cry for help, asking the Indian authorities to recognize their plight and grant them the protection they deserve. They call for autonomy and separate administration. Given the lack of security and the ongoing threats to their survival, the Kuki people are making a strong case for autonomy. They seek a separate administration within the Indian Union, which would allow them to govern their affairs, protect their land, and preserve their culture and traditions. This demand for autonomy is rooted in the historical and cultural distinctiveness of the Kuki people, as well as their unique geographic location, which spans across 3 countries. The Kuki people have consistently been marginalized within the larger political framework of Manipur and India. Their language, culture, and history are often ignored or misrepresented in national narratives. The Kuki volunteers' efforts to defend their land are not just about military protection, but also about ensuring that their culture is not erased in the face of external pressures. The demand for autonomy is not an attempt to secede from India, but a call for a fair and just solution that respects the rights and dignity of the Kuki people. The Kuki people, like any other community, have the right to govern themselves, to protect their lands, and to preserve their way of life. Autonomy would provide the Kuki people with the tools and resources to ensure their survival in a rapidly changing world. Conclusion: a call for justice and recognition. The Kuki people's struggle is not just a local issue, confined to the state of Manipur or the northeastern region of India. It is a matter of justice, human rights, and the recognition of indigenous peoples' rights to self-determination. The Kuki volunteers, though they have been forced into action out of necessity, embody the spirit of resistance and resilience that has defined the Kuki people for centuries. It is imperative that the Indian authorities listen to the voices of the Kuki people and address their concerns. The ongoing violence, the displacement of thousands of families, and the forced occupation of Kuki lands cannot be ignored. The Kuki people are citizens of India, and they deserve the same protection, rights, and respect as any other community in the country. In the face of these challenges, the Kuki people have not given up their struggle for justice. They continue to fight not just for their survival, but for their dignity and their rightful place in the history of India. It is time for the Indian government to recognize the Kuki people's unique history, their contributions to India's freedom struggle, and their rightful claim to their ancestral lands. The disclaimer. The views expressed in this article are based on the experiences and perspectives of the Kuki people and are presented in the context of ongoing challenges faced by the Kuki community in Manipur. The intent is to highlight the necessity of self-defense and the call for justice. Readers are encouraged to explore the issue further through multiple sources to gain a comprehensive understanding of the complexities involved. For more insights and updates on the Kuki people's struggle, please consider subscribing to Zalengam Media, a platform dedicated to highlighting the voices of the Kuki community and other marginalized groups.